everyone. Welcome to Chatting with Charlie, where we're discussing the May Visa Bulletin. I'm here in Seoul, Korea, attending an ALA conference. How are you, Charlie?
Great. Welcome, everybody from North Carolina.
Yeah, and so really not much to talk about, I want to say, in the May Visa Bulletin, but let's walk through the family base. So, Charlie, are we seeing any significant movement in the family base categories?
Not really. We've seen some movement, but this is to be expected. They really haven't advanced the date in many, many months previously. So the fact that they did start moving for April and some for May, that's a positive sign. And there was a dramatic increase in the F2A application filing date, which means state is trying to generate demand and people submitting documentation now, so they'll be ready to go in the coming year.
Okay. And now let's talk about employment base. And if we look at all chargeability, like I said, no movement, right, since last April?
No movement for the month of May. And really, I did not expect any movement for May.
Okay, so it's aligned with your prediction. So all chargeability is staying the same for EB1, 2, and 3. And then if we move to the next slide, we look at China. And so for China, again, same thing as EB1, no movement again. Similar to your predictions.
Yeah, with EB1, as I mentioned last month, I believe the fact that they've been holding the date is that state anticipates that they have plenty of demand within that date to reach the annual limits. So I would not expect any movement of the China employment first preference date for the remainder of the year. And if there were some slight movement, people can be pleasantly surprised.
Well, that means that it would have only moved last October. So for the entire fiscal year, would have only moved once or twice. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then let's go to India. And a little bit of movement here we see in EB3 for a couple weeks, but EB1 and EB2 remain the same. Any comments here?
Just everybody was probably very excited with the EB1 movement for the month of April. I would not expect any movement of the EB1 India date for the time being because there's really no need to advance it until they're definitely sure that they have additional numbers that can be provided because they have so much pending demand. They can move the date at any point toward maybe July, August, or even wait till September and still use all the available numbers. In EB2, I think they're at where they want to be. It was nice that there was some advance for EB3, but basically for rest of world, China and India, it appears that the quarterly movements that I've been predicting are pretty much holding true. So I would also expect the dates to potentially hold for the month of June and possibly something in July. But the fact that the dates moved so much in most of the employment categories for the month of April raises my concern that there could be corrective action later in the summer and corrective action in the form of no movement of the dates or potentially having to retrogress some dates at some point in the summer.
Okay, so that means June, we likely won't see much movement. And then July, there could possibly be some sort of retrogression or August.
Yeah, that's my concern that they seem to have very drastic movements of the dates for the month of April. I would have been more conservative and move them slowly to prevent any potential need for a retrogression or delay it till the very end of the year. So again, I'm concerned with the drastic movement of April dates, potentially requiring a retrogression later in the year. In a best case scenario, just hold the dates for an extended period of time.
Okay, just for our listeners, the fiscal year is going to end on September 30th. So you really need to get all your filings in as soon as you can before any sort of retrogression hits and we start seeing some backward movement because the next quarter will start up in July. So we may or may not see any movement, right, Charlie? Is that basically what we're saying?
Correct. And it's, as I've said in the past, it's extremely important for people, if you're processing overseas, especially, appear for your interview in the scheduled month. If you have a problem, try to overcome any problems during the original month your case is scheduled. And I would strongly advise against rescheduling an appointment for a later month if you're processing overseas, because although your case may be eligible in April or May, you may find if you reschedule it to June or later that a number will not be available to you.
Yeah, and they usually have staffing changes in the summer, right? And if there's a reduction in the staffing, then it'll really be impacted at the consulates, correct?
Correct. And yes, because the dates typically during the first 9 months will use approximately 81% of the numbers. And so there's only about 19% of the numbers remaining for the months of July through September, meaning those are always susceptible to retrogressions if the State Department estimates of number use are not accurate in the earlier months.
Yeah, so respond to your RFEs if you have one for your adjustments. If they're asking for anything, I would recommend you respond as soon as possible so you can capture that number before it goes away. Charlie, we had one comment on our YouTube, and one of them was about the EB2 and EB3 and the duplicate applications. And I think one of the reasons being we see some people changing lanes, meaning that they were in EB3 and then they upgrade to EB2 and then they see EB3s faster and they want to go downgrade again. So, what are your comments on that about the duplicate filings and applications?
Yeah, we have touched on that in past discussions, but it's important to remember the State Department only has the applicant listed in the original category they applied in. So if somebody applied originally in the EB3 category and they're upgrading to EB2, then the State Department will have them listed in EB3 until the fact that the USCIS notifies state to remove them from the EB3 category so that they can request a number for them in the EB2. Or if the applicant was originally reported in the EB2 and is downgrading, the same thing. State will have them in the originally requested reported category until notified. So the state is not duplicating number use in their determination of the dates. It's also important to remember that in fiscal 2022, we had the all-time high employment limit of approximately 281,000, followed by a high limit in 2023. But during 2022, there was a strong emphasis from the USCIS to maximize number use, and they did an amazing job doing so. But in doing that, the dates advanced rapidly through 2013 and into calendar year 2014. The reason being, I believe, it was easier for USCIS to finalize action on applicants that had filed later, and therefore they just basically skipped over the people with 2012, potentially 2011, and early 2013 dates because it was more difficult to adjudicate those cases. So we're having to go through those cases now. And again, although the state may be able to advance the date a little faster, I really don't think it's going to happen on a regular basis.
Yeah, so basically, what Charlie, you're saying is it really wasn't a first in, first out sort of processing going on during that time period. It was taking longer to process those with older application dates, and so they're just basically catching up now.
Yeah, basically they took care of the low-hanging fruit that were easy to adjudicate back then and now are back to the normal processing scheme.
Yeah, so just to explain again, it wasn't because there were duplicates that things were moving faster, because they only request one number at a time. So you're either sitting in EB3 and then you're waiting, and then USCIS comes in and says, no, actually, this applicant is getting their green card through EB2, and then state does the switcheroo. So they're not really counted in both lanes. And then again, what Charlie said, there was low hanging fruit. So when the dates had moved, they were actually adjudicating those that they received first because those were documentarily ready. They'd have everything, while the other applications still had to get an RFE for medical or things like that. So that could possibly explain why all this movement happened during that time period. Anything else, Charlie?
No, but always glad to hear from our listeners because sometimes they raise some good points or things that need to be addressed because others may have the same type of question.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, just add them to your comments as you watch us on YouTube. Anything else, Charlie, you want to say as we wrap up?
Just it's going to be interesting to see what happens for the month of June. And in terms of my predictions for movement of the dates, I think that they're pretty much, for the time being, they'll hold what we've predicted in the past, and we'll maybe come up with some new predictions for the June Visa Bulletin recap if it's likely to see any major changes.
Okay, well, thank you, Charlie, and thanks for staying tuned to Chatting with Charlie.
Take care.